You hear the name Machiavelli, and right away a certain image pops into your head, doesn't it? Some shadowy figure whispering dark, cynical advice into a ruler's ear. I mean, his very name has become shorthand for cunning, ruthless, backstabbing politics. But is that really the whole story? Let's dig in and find out.
For 500 years, people have been arguing about this guy, Niccolò Machiavelli. Was he a teacher of evil, a guy who literally wrote the handbook for gangsters? Or was he something else entirely? A brilliant, clear-eyed political analyst, maybe even a patriot, just trying to write a survival guide for leaders in a brutally dangerous world. And that's the big question we're going to tackle here.
You see, to really get his book, you have to get the man first. And Niccolò Machiavelli wasn't some philosopher tucked away in an ivory tower, thinking about abstract ideas. No way. This guy was a man of action. He was a high-ranking politician, a diplomat for the Republic of Florence. For 14 years, he was right there, at the center of it all. And then, it all came crashing down.
And what's just wild is how fast and how completely his entire world got turned upside down. I mean, for 14 years, he's serving Florence with everything he's got. He's traveling all over, negotiating with kings and popes. He even gets a front row seat to the ruthless tactics of the infamous Cesare Borgia. But then, in 1512, boom, the Florentine Republic is overthrown. The super powerful Medici family comes roaring back into power, and Machiavelli, who was a loyal servant of the old government, well, he's finished. He gets arrested, accused of conspiracy, he's brutally tortured, and then he's exiled from the city he loves.
So all of a sudden he's powerless, he's broke, and he's desperate. Machiavelli retreats to his little farm out in the country. And it's right here, in this moment of total personal and professional crisis, that he sits down and writes The Prince. And you have to understand, it was basically a job application. It was a handbook for the new Medici ruler, designed to show them, hey, I still know how politics works. I can be useful to you. It was a book born from failure, written to teach success.
And that failure he felt, it wasn't just personal. It really reflected the chaos of his entire world. To really get why his advice was so radical, so shocking, you have to picture the Italy he was living in. This wasn't some stable, peaceful era. Okay, sure, Renaissance Italy was the cultural capital of the world, but politically, it was an absolute disaster zone.
The most important thing to get is that there was no Italy, not like we think of it. The peninsula was just this fractured mess of competing city-states. You had the 5 big players, Florence, Venice, Milan, the Pope's own territories, and Naples. And they were constantly scheming, backstabbing, and going to war with each other. And as if that wasn't bad enough, you had these huge unified nations like France and Spain just looking down at Italy like it was a buffet, ready to be carved up.
And this quote right here, which Machiavelli himself uses, just says it all. It's talking about the French invasion of 1494. The French army basically just marched right through Italy, and their guys used chalk to mark the doors of the houses where their soldiers were going to stay. There was practically no resistance. Italy was getting carved up because it was divided and it was weak.
And that gets us right to the heart of it. The Prince isn't some abstract textbook on philosophy. It's an emergency room manual for politics. Machiavelli is looking at all this chaos, all these foreign invasions, all the weak Italian leaders, and he's asking a brutally practical question. In a world like this, what does it actually take to grab power and build a state that can survive? So, what was his answer? Well, his solution was going to shake the very foundations of Western political thought. He pretty much took all the old rule books, threw them out the window, and wrote a completely new one.
For centuries, all the books written for rulers were about the same thing. Christian virtues. Be merciful, be honest, be pious, make sure your people love you. They described a perfect, ideal world. But Machiavelli looked around and said, that's terrible advice for the real world. He argued that if you try to act like a saint when everyone else is a sinner, you're just going to get crushed. So he decided to write about the world as it is, not as we wish it would be.
This quote right here from chapter 15 is the absolute core of his entire philosophy. What he's saying is that idealism is dangerous. If you actually want to survive and succeed, you have to be a realist. You have to focus on what works, not just what's considered morally good in the traditional sense.
And this realism is what leads to his most infamous advice. He says, look, it's better to be feared than loved, because fear is just a more reliable tool than love. He says cruelty, if you use it quickly and decisively to make the state safe, can actually be a good thing. And promises? Well, you should break them if keeping them would hurt you or your state. And then there's the big one, the idea we all know, the ends justify the means. For him, the ultimate goal is a secure, stable state, and if you achieve that, people will judge your actions as honorable, no matter what you had to do.
Okay, but how does a leader actually put all this into practice? For Machiavelli, it all came down to this constant battle, this cosmic tug-of-war between two key forces that every single leader has to face, fortuna and virtù.
So first up, you've got fortuna, or fortune. Just think of it as luck, chaos, all the random stuff you can't control. A sudden plague, a rival dying unexpectedly, a freak storm that wrecks your navy. Machiavelli figured that fortune is this incredibly powerful force, and it governs about half of everything that happens in our lives. So how do you fight back against all that chaos? With virtue. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. Virtue does not mean virtue in the way we think of it, like being a good moral person. No, it means skill, talent, boldness, drive. It's that ability to see an opportunity in the middle of a crisis, to act decisively, and to bend events to your will. It's having the strength to do what's necessary, even if it's ugly. So here's the big picture. You can't stop the river of fortune from flooding. But a leader with real virtù can build dams and channels to prepare for it, to direct its flow, and maybe even use its power. For Machiavelli, all of human history is just this constant struggle between the random chaos of fortune and the focused, powerful energy of human virtù. So, as you can probably imagine, when this book was finally published after Machiavelli died, it caused an absolute firestorm of controversy. A firestorm that has honestly never really gone out. Almost right away, his name became an insult. To call someone Machiavellian meant they were a schemer, a godless tyrant. In places like Protestant England, they turned him into a stock villain in their plays. You know, the bad guy who comes on stage and literally announces that he thinks religion is just a toy for children.
The book's reputation has just been on a wild roller coaster ever since. In 1559, the Catholic Church banned all of his writings, period. But then, a couple hundred years later, you have thinkers like Rousseau saying, wait a minute, this guy's a hero. They argued that by showing rulers how to be tyrants, he was secretly teaching the people how to spot and fight back against them. And then you jump to the 20th century, and the philosopher Bertrand Russell is calling it a gangster's handbook. The debate just never stops.
And that brings us right back to where we started. So what's the verdict? Was Machiavelli writing a universal guide on how to be a tyrant for all time? Or was he just a product of his incredibly violent, chaotic era? A patriot giving extreme medicine to a deathly ill patient, his beloved, broken Italy. Ultimately, that's for you to wrestle with. But his work leaves us with this one chilling final thought that feels just as relevant today as it did 5 centuries ago. When things fall apart, when you're faced with total chaos and the collapse of order, are the ruthless rules of power he described not just an option, but maybe inevitable?